It was just another quiet afternoon at the corner coffee shop. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow through the windows, and the sound of chatter mixed with the clinking of coffee cups. Sarah sat at a small table with a few friends, their laughter filling the air. She was the kind of person who liked to stay out of the spotlight, always listening more than talking. Today, like many others, she quietly sipped on her caramel latte, letting the conversation flow around her. Her friends were deep in a friendly debate about who could cook the best meal. The topic came up often, but as usual, the conversation never seemed to get anywhere. Everyone had an opinion, but no one was willing to put their skills to the test. One of them, a playful soul named Jessica, turned to Sarah with a mischievous grin. "Come on, Sarah," she said, nudging her with a laugh. "We all know you're the quiet type. But hey, do you even know how to cook? Why don't you show us?" The group burst into light laughter, all eyes on Sarah. It was a joke, of course. They didn't expect her to take it seriously. After all, Sarah was always the calm, reserved one who seemed to be content with just blending into the background. She wasn't the loud, confident type who liked to show off. Everyone was sure she wouldn't be able to come up with anything impressive. Sarah, however, didn't react the way they expected. She didn't smile nervously or try to brush it off. Instead, she raised an eyebrow and shrugged casually. "Sure," she said, "I'll cook something for you all. But don't get your hopes up. It won't be anything fancy." Her friends thought she was joking. It was all in good fun after all. They made a few more jokes at her expense, saying things like, "You probably don't even know how to boil pasta, do you? And we'll be lucky if it doesn't burn down the kitchen." They continued to laugh, thinking they were just teasing her, unaware that they were about to make a huge mistake. "All right then," Jessica said, still grinning. "We'll get the ingredients, and you can whip us up something impressive if you can." Sarah just smiled, a knowing twinkle in her eye. As the group eagerly made plans to gather what they thought were ordinary ingredients, pasta, chicken, tomatoes, vegetables, she didn't let on that she was already quietly plotting her response to their challenge. Sarah wasn't just anyone. She wasn't the quiet, ordinary person they believed her to be. And by the time the night was over, her friends would realize that they had just unknowingly challenged someone far beyond what they could ever imagine. What they didn't know was that Sarah wasn't just good at cooking. She was a 10-time culinary champion, and her skills were about to leave them in complete shock. That evening, the kitchen buzzed with excitement. The group of friends had gathered around, each of them joking and teasing, eagerly waiting to see how Sarah would handle her cooking challenge. They still couldn't believe she'd agreed to it. After all, to them, she was just a quiet woman who didn't like to draw attention to herself. They expected the night to end with some awkward, underwhelming meal. None of them had any idea what was coming. As they handed her the list of ingredients, Sarah noticed the playful smirk on their faces. Pasta, chicken breasts, tomatoes, and vegetables. Simple, everyday items. They thought these were going to be enough to stump her. They made fun of her, saying things like, "We'll be lucky if we don't end up with a burned mess. And don't forget to boil the pasta without turning it into mush." Their laughter filled the room as they handed over the ingredients like they were setting her up for failure. Sarah just smiled and took the ingredients in stride. She wasn't bothered by the jokes or the challenge. In fact, it almost made her excited. It had been years since she'd been in a kitchen like this, one where her skills weren't known and where her talent wasn't expected. She had spent years winning national culinary competitions, but she had kept it all quiet, preferring to cook in the privacy of her own home or for her family. No one had ever seen her in action until now. With a calm and collected demeanor, Sarah set to work. The first thing she did was take the chicken breasts and season them with a blend of herbs and spices. As her hands moved across the ingredients, it was clear that she was in her element. She didn't hesitate or waste time. Everything was done with purpose, each step a reflection of years of experience. She marinated the chicken carefully, rubbing the spices into the meat as she prepared to cook it. The group watched from the sidelines, their eyes widening as they saw her skills in action. The way she moved in the kitchen, with confidence and ease, made them pause for a moment. No one had expected this level of focus. They had expected a disaster, maybe a kitchen filled with smoke and overcooked food. But instead, they were witnessing something different. It wasn't just cooking, it was art in motion. While the chicken marinated, Sarah turned to the vegetables. She sliced them with precision, each cut uniform and effortless. She tossed them into a pan and added olive oil, salt, and pepper, the scent of roasted vegetables filling the room. Her friends exchanged confused glances. This wasn't what they had expected. No one said anything, but they were all starting to realize that this challenge might be a lot more serious than they had thought. As the meal slowly took shape, the group's playful banter started to quiet down. They weren't sure what was happening, but they couldn't ignore the fact that something incredible was happening right in front of them. They had thought they were just setting up a joke, but now they were seeing something extraordinary unfold before their eyes. And they had no idea that this was only the beginning. As the smells from the kitchen filled the air, the group of friends grew quieter and more unsure of what to say. They had been joking earlier, laughing about how Sarah was probably going to ruin everything, but now things felt different. There was no burning, no mistakes, just the steady rhythm of her hands moving from one task to the next, as though she had done this 1,000 times before. They exchanged nervous glances, realizing they had seriously underestimated her. Sarah wasn't fazed by their stares. She had seen this kind of reaction many times before, but this time she kept her focus entirely on the meal. She knew her friends still thought it was all just a game, but deep down, she was about to show them just how wrong they were. She worked on each dish as though it were the most important thing in the world, carefully crafting each piece, each ingredient, into something that would not only surprise them, but leave them speechless. She moved on to the pasta next, boiling it just enough so that it was perfectly al dente. While the noodles cooked, she prepared a light yet flavorful sauce, combining tomatoes, garlic, fresh basil, and a touch of cream. She stirred it slowly, letting the ingredients meld together into a rich, creamy sauce that would complement the pasta beautifully. It was simple, but done right, it would be perfect. As the pasta finished cooking, she drained it and tossed it in the sauce, making sure each piece was coated evenly. She then plated the first course, garnishing it with fresh Parmesan and a sprinkle of basil leaves. Sarah set the plate down on the table in front of her friends, who were now watching her closely, unsure what to expect. The warm aroma of the dish reached their noses, and for the first time that evening, they were quiet. They exchanged glances, clearly impressed, but still skeptical. "Well, here goes," one of them said, hesitantly picking up a fork. They all dug in, taking their first bites. The moment the food hit their tongues, everything changed. No one spoke for a few moments. It was as if time stopped, and all they could focus on was the explosion of flavors in their mouths. The pasta was perfectly cooked, the sauce rich and smooth, with just the right amount of creaminess. It was more than they had expected, way more. This is amazing," one of them finally said, breaking the silence. Another friend nodded, looking just as surprised. "Seriously, Sarah, what did you put in this?" But Sarah just smiled and shrugged. She wasn't going to reveal too much yet. The night had just begun, and she still had 2 more courses to go. As her friends continued to eat, their skepticism slowly turned into admiration. They had never thought that Sarah could cook anything close to this level. In fact, they were starting to wonder if they had been wrong about her in more ways than one. But they couldn't have known. Sarah had never felt the need to share her skills with them, and maybe that was a part of her charm. She wasn't about to flaunt her accomplishments. She was here to simply do what she loved. And right now, she was showing them that sometimes you can never truly judge someone by their quiet demeanor. As the last bite of pasta disappeared, the group of friends sat back in their chairs, staring at their empty plates. They weren't just full, they were impressed. No one had expected that simple pasta dish to taste like something from a 5-star restaurant. They exchanged glances, their eyes wide with disbelief. Sarah, however, seemed calm and composed, as if this was just another day in the kitchen. She didn't show any sign of smugness or arrogance, just a quiet satisfaction that they were enjoying the meal. "Okay, I admit it," Jessica said, breaking the silence. "I didn't think you had it in you." The others nodded in agreement, still trying to process what had just happened. Sarah's pasta had turned out perfect, and now they were eager to see what she would do next. Without missing a beat, Sarah stood up and moved to the stove again. Her friends watched her closely, trying to figure out what she was going to do. She was moving quickly, but with a calm precision, as if she had done this so many times that it was second nature. Next, she pulled out the chicken breasts she had seasoned earlier, and the smell of the herbs and spices filled the room. She placed them in a hot pan, the sizzle of the meat adding a nice soundtrack to the evening. While the chicken cooked, she turned her attention to the vegetables. She roasted them in the oven, carefully placing them on a tray, spreading them out evenly. It was a simple task, but it was the little details that made all the difference. The vegetables were perfectly arranged, their edges just starting to turn golden brown. She was treating every step like it was an art form, each ingredient carefully prepared and presented. As the chicken finished cooking, Sarah took a moment to check it. The golden crust on the outside and the juicy tenderness inside were just right. She didn't rush. She let it rest for a minute before slicing it perfectly into neat, even pieces. Her friends were watching her in awe. They had never seen someone cook with such confidence and skill, especially someone who had been so quiet and reserved just hours before. They had no idea that they were in the presence of a true culinary expert. Sarah plated the dish with ease, arranging the roasted vegetables around the chicken and drizzling a rich, tangy sauce over the top. The vibrant colors of the vegetables and the perfectly cooked chicken made for an elegant presentation. She set the plates down in front of her friends, who now couldn't contain their curiosity. Is this really just chicken and vegetables?" One of them asked, still skeptical. Sarah simply smiled. "You'll see," she said softly. The group dug in hesitantly at first, still unsure of what they were about to experience. But the moment the food touched their tongues, everything changed again. The chicken was tender and flavorful, the seasoning perfect. The vegetables had just the right amount of sweetness, with a slight char that added depth. And the sauce. It brought everything together in a way that made it all taste like it came from a high-end restaurant. "No way," one of her friends muttered, almost unable to believe what they were eating. "This is insane." There was no more joking now. The group was silent, their faces full of wonder. They had started the evening thinking they were setting up a joke, but now they were in awe. Sarah wasn't just a quiet woman who could cook a little. She was a culinary mastermind, and they were lucky to be eating her creations. They couldn't wait to see what was next. The third and final course was almost ready. The group of friends had been eating quietly, savoring each bite of the meal, still shocked by how good everything had been so far. They were beginning to realize that the simple challenge they had thrown at Sarah had turned into something far more impressive than they could have imagined. As the last of the chicken and vegetables disappeared from their plates, they sat back, waiting in anticipation. What could she possibly do next? Sarah, meanwhile, was moving around the kitchen with the same calm confidence. She wasn't worried or nervous. Instead, she was focused, completely at ease. Her friends had been watching her all evening, but now they were more aware than ever of how skilled she was. It wasn't just the food, it was the way she carried herself, the way she made everything look so effortless. She pulled out a small bowl and started preparing the dessert. She had decided on panna cotta, a creamy, delicate Italian dessert that would be the perfect way to end the meal. She mixed cream, sugar, and vanilla, gently heating the mixture until it was smooth and silky. She added a few sheets of gelatin, stirring them in until they dissolved completely. With practiced hands, she poured the mixture into small cups and set them aside to chill. While the panna cotta set, Sarah turned her attention to the fresh berries she had brought along. She carefully washed them, picking out the ripest strawberries and raspberries. Then she made a simple berry compote by cooking the fruit with a bit of sugar and lemon juice. The sarupi, sweet sauce, would be the perfect topping for the panna cotta, adding a burst of fresh flavor to the creamy base. As she worked, the group of friends exchanged looks. They were still reeling from the meal they had just eaten. The chicken had been perfectly cooked, the vegetables roasted to perfection, and the pasta, well, it was unlike anything they had ever tasted. But dessert? They hadn't expected her to pull off something like this. They had figured she'd stick with something simple, but now, watching her work, they realized that they hadn't even begun to understand the depth of her talent. Sarah finished the panna cotta and carefully spooned the berry compote over the top, the rich red sauce dripping down the sides in a beautiful pattern. She set the small cups down in front of her friends, who stared at them in awe. The dessert looked like something straight out of a professional kitchen, delicate, elegant, and perfectly presented. "I can't believe this is happening," one of her friends muttered, still in shock. This looks like it belongs in a fancy restaurant." Sarah just smiled, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "It's just panna cotta," she said casually, but even she couldn't hide the pride in her voice. The group hesitated for a moment before digging in. As soon as the dessert hit their mouths, they were once again silenced. The panna cotta was smooth and velvety, with a light sweetness that melted in their mouths. The berry compote added the perfect balance of tartness, making the entire dish feel like a burst of fresh summer on their tongues. "This is perfect," one of them said, his voice barely a whisper. The group didn't need to say anything else. They had all learned the same lesson that night. Never underestimate someone, especially when they're as quiet and unassuming as Sarah. She had just proven that she was a master in the kitchen, and they were lucky enough to witness it firsthand. What had started as a joke had turned into an unforgettable evening, and none of them would ever look at Sarah the same way again. The room was still filled with the lingering warmth of the meal, and the group of friends sat back, their stomachs full and their minds racing. It wasn't just the food they were trying to process. It was the fact that Sarah, the quiet woman who had always kept to herself, was a culinary genius. They had never seen her in this light, and now they were grappling with the realization that she wasn't just another person in their circle. She had been hiding something incredible all along. "So Sarah," Jessica said, breaking the silence, "how did you even learn to cook like this? I mean, we had no idea." The others nodded, their faces full of curiosity. No one had expected her to be so talented in the kitchen, least of all them. The evening had started as a joke, but now it felt like they had been part of a secret they never knew existed. Sarah leaned back in her chair, a small smile playing on her lips. She wasn't embarrassed or uncomfortable with the attention. In fact, she seemed almost amused by it. She had kept her culinary skills to herself for years, never feeling the need to boast or share her accomplishments. But now, with her friends so genuinely curious, it felt like the right time to tell them the truth. "Well," she began, her voice calm and steady, "I guess you could say it's a long story. I've been cooking for as long as I can remember. Growing up, my family didn't have much, so I learned how to make the most of what we had. I started cooking at home when I was a kid, just simple stuff at first, but over time, I got better." She paused, the weight of her words hanging in the air. "But that's not all," she continued. "When I got older, I entered a few cooking competitions. At first, it was just for fun, but eventually I started winning. A lot. 10 times to be exact." She smiled slightly, as if the number wasn't that big of a deal to her. But her friends were stunned. 10-time champion. They couldn't wrap their heads around it. "You're a 10-time champion?" Jessica asked, almost laughing in disbelief. "No way. How come you never told us?" Sarah shrugged, a quiet, almost thoughtful look crossing her face. "I guess I never saw the need to share. Cooking has always been my passion, but it's not something I've ever felt the need to show off. I just do it because I love it. It's never been about the trophies or the recognition for me." The group sat there, digesting her words, their minds still trying to catch up with everything they had just learned. They had no idea that Sarah, the person they had always thought of as quiet and unassuming, had such an impressive background. It was like they had been living in a completely different reality. "So, you just cook like that for fun?" one of them asked, still processing. "Yes," Sarah said with a soft chuckle, "for fun, but also because cooking is something that grounds me. It's my escape, my way of expressing myself." As her friends sat in stunned silence, they finally realized the depth of Sarah's talent. It wasn't just her cooking. It was her humility, her ability to stay grounded even when surrounded by a world of accolades and recognition. The quiet woman they had underestimated had turned out to be someone far more extraordinary than they could have imagined. They had learned their lesson: never judge someone by their quiet nature. Sometimes, the most incredible people are the ones who keep their brilliance hidden away. The night had shifted. What had started as a simple dinner with playful teasing had now turned into something much deeper. Sarah's friends were no longer just impressed by her cooking. They were humbled. They were slowly realizing just how much they had underestimated her. The quiet, reserved woman sitting at the table wasn't just someone they knew from coffee shop chats and casual hangouts. She was a culinary champion, a master in the kitchen who had quietly carried her skills and achievements without ever feeling the need to show off. And now, as the evening wound down, they found themselves struggling to process everything they had learned. The conversation had turned from laughter and joking to questions about her career, her experiences in the culinary world. They wanted to know more, to understand what drove her, how she kept her passion hidden for so long. It was almost as if the quiet Sarah they thought they knew had been replaced by someone entirely different, someone with a depth and brilliance they had never imagined. "So, Sarah," Tom asked, his voice soft with curiosity, "if you've been cooking professionally for so long, why didn't you ever tell us about it? I mean, 10 times? That's huge." Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes thoughtful. She had never really discussed her competitive cooking career with anyone outside her family. It wasn't because she was ashamed of it or wanted to hide it. It was just that, for her, cooking was always about the process, the creation, not the accolades. She had never sought the spotlight. "It's not that I didn't want to share," she began, her voice calm but honest. "It's just, when you love something so much, sometimes you don't need to talk about it. The joy of cooking has always been enough for me. And besides, the competitions, the trophies, they're not what defines me. What matters is the joy of creating something from scratch and seeing people enjoy it. That's why I do it." Her friends nodded, some still looking at her with wide eyes, others just trying to understand how they had missed all of this for so long. It was clear now that Sarah wasn't just a quiet woman with a hidden talent. She was someone who had built a life around her passion without needing validation from anyone else. She had never felt the need to boast or show off. Instead, she had quietly worked, honed her skills, and achieved more than they could have ever guessed. "But still," Jessica said, shaking her head in disbelief, "how did you keep it a secret all this time? I mean, 10-time champion. That's impressive. Most people would be shouting it from the rooftops." Sarah chuckled softly, a small smile playing on her lips. "Maybe, but it's just not who I am. I've never been interested in fame or recognition. I love the kitchen. I love feeding people. And that's enough for me." The group fell silent for a moment, processing her words. There was a deep respect growing in the room, a realization that they had misjudged her, that they had only seen a small part of who Sarah really was. They had seen the quiet woman in the corner, not the culinary mastermind who had achieved incredible things. Finally, Tom spoke again, his voice full of admiration. "You know, Sarah, I think we all owe you an apology. We didn't know you were this amazing. We've been making jokes all night, but now we realize how wrong we were." Sarah smiled, her eyes soft with gratitude. "No need for apologies," she said gently. "It's just who I am. I'm glad you enjoyed the food. That's all that matters." And as the night continued, the group of friends understood something important. The quietest people sometimes have the loudest stories to tell, and Sarah's story had just begun to unfold. As the evening came to a close, the group of friends sat back in their chairs, reflecting on everything that had happened. The night had started off with playful teasing, a harmless joke about Sarah's cooking skills, but it had ended with them learning more about her than they ever expected. They had witnessed her talent firsthand, and it was clear now that Sarah was much more than they had ever given her credit for. As they all chatted and laughed together, the energy in the room was different. The air was lighter, filled with newfound respect and admiration for their quiet friend. There was no more joking about her cooking. Instead, they were asking questions, eager to know more about the woman who had so effortlessly dazzled them with her culinary skills. "So what happens now?" Jessica asked, leaning forward in her chair. "Are you going to keep cooking like this for us, or are you finally going to open your own restaurant?" Sarah paused for a moment, her eyes thoughtful. She had always kept her cooking to herself, preferring to cook for friends and family rather than taking her talents to the public. She hadn't ever felt the need to pursue fame or fortune in the culinary world. It had always been about the joy of creating something beautiful, something that brought people together. "I'm not sure," Sarah said quietly. "I never really thought about opening a restaurant. I love cooking, but it's more of a personal thing for me. Maybe one day I'll teach a cooking class or something, but right now, this is enough. Sharing meals with people I care about, that's what matters to me." Her friends listened, nodding in understanding. They admired her humility and the way she had stayed true to herself. even with her impressive accomplishments. They had learned a valuable lesson that night. Not everything had to be about seeking recognition or fame. Sometimes the most fulfilling things in life were the quiet passions, the ones you did because you loved them, not because you wanted others to notice. As the evening wound down and the last few crumbs of dessert were finished off, Sarah's friends started to get ready to leave. But before they did, they all took a moment to thank her. Honestly, Sarah, Tom said, his voice full of sincerity, this has been one of the best meals we've ever had. We were all wrong about you, and we're really sorry for making jokes earlier. You're amazing. Sarah smiled, her eyes soft with gratitude. Thank you. It was my pleasure. I'm just glad you enjoyed it. With warm hugs and promises to get together again soon, the group of friends left, each of them carrying a piece of the night with them. They had learned so much, not just about Sarah's culinary talent, but about the power of quiet passion and humility. They would never again look at her in the same way, and they would never forget the night when they discovered that the simple woman they had once underestimated was, in fact, a 10-time culinary champion. As the door closed behind them, Sarah cleaned up the kitchen, a peaceful smile on her face. She had shared a part of herself with her friends, and that was enough. She didn't need fame or recognition, just the joy of cooking and the satisfaction of knowing her passion had touched the people she cared about most.